The following episode of the Comics and Crypto podcast is for informational purposes only, and anything expressed by the hosts or their guests is solely their opinion. This podcast does not constitute financial advice, and anyone wishing to invest should seek their own independent financial or professional help. Have fun and enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Sean O'Hare, and I know comics.
Hi, I'm Spencer Vogel, and I know crypto.
Hi, I'm Kevin Lee Loader, and I don't know shit. This is the Comics and Crypto podcast.
Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, collectors world in a digital age. Comics and crypto, crypto and comics, it's where the next billionaires will be made. It's comics and crypto.
Yeah, I mean, I think like augmented reality, especially kind of like what you were saying there, seeing somebody in person that has it, it's like if everybody has, augmented reality glasses on and, your glasses somehow know that somebody's wearing a certain thing, basically augmented on top of, the sneakers that you're wearing, you can have, cool animations that are coming out of it or, fire spitting out the back or, like Artifact released recently, basically the sweatshirt they did with Nike where, the wings coming out the back where, people can see that. So I think that's like where the digital fashion, where it starts meeting the physical world. I think it's going to be so exciting.
That makes so much sense to me. And I am very excited by AR. The only thing that I will say about AR is I think and this is true of VR too, is like, I just think it's further away than anyone really wants to admit. Like Facebook just poured in, or Meta, whatever, just poured in like however many billions of dollars to this. And they're like burning capital hand over fist and have almost nothing to show for it. And so like, do I think there will be a world where AR and or VR is adopted at a pretty high rate? I do. But I think that world's like further out than people want to say that it is. Like, there's plenty of VR headsets that exist out there today, and there's like no mass adoption. No one's like wearing these things, that often to do anything really that I'm aware of. Like people have one as sort of a novelty, and maybe they'll put it on to like play a video game or, like sit in like a seat at a stadium or something. But like there's no like real mass adoption there yet. And I certainly am much more. If you think about mass adoption, I can think of a world where mass adoption of AR would lead to like a much better society. And I think mass adoption of VR would probably lead to a much worse society. So that's part of the reason I'm very excited about AR.
Same.
And you can totally imagine too, like, hey, look, it's got like my directions and my glasses and it just like shows me where to go. And it's like, I turn my head and look at a restaurant and it tells me the ratings and shows me their menu, right? Like there's all sorts of cool things that can be added into AR that I'm really excited about. And I will say like, yeah, totally. I'm with you. I think when AR becomes what it can become and will become, those items will probably be very valuable. I'm just curious how far off mass adoption of AR is. And I think it's probably over a decade out and maybe even a good bit more than that. I think we'll see it in our lifetimes, but like, I don't know. It's like, there's a little part of me. It's like, with some of the digital wearables, like how far will we get, with AR tech to make those really valuable? Because some of that bet is dependent on the AR tech becoming more adopted, right?
When Apple releases their first AR glasses, that doesn't mean there's going to be worldwide adoption overnight. They're probably going to be very expensive. So they're, it's going to take time, probably 5+ years after their first release, that people will start to catch on because they're going to get cheaper and cheaper as they're released over time.
Yeah. And some of it, the product just has to be good enough too, that people are like, yeah, I'm going to wear this, like, and you've got like battery life concerns and all this sort of stuff. And it'll be really interesting to watch it all play out. And I think all of us are going to be alive for it and be able to enjoy it and see it. But I just don't think that like, we're not going to see everyone walk around with headsets in the next 10 years.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And I mean, even for me, like I'm excited for AR, but there's a lot more that AR can offer that I'm tremendously excited about, especially based on AI that we've seen recently. AI has been incredibly impressive just in a short period of time. And like, imagine having conversations, using AR glasses. You can have a conversation with somebody in Japan and you hear their voice in English, and then they hear your voice in Japanese, and you're able to listen and have a full conversation with them. Like that's the kind of stuff you're going to be able to do with AR glasses. Have you had a chance to dive into the VeVe digital collectibles much?
I was hoping you would bring this up because the answer to that is really no. And I'm very interested to learn and hear more.
It's been 2 years now, basically. Yeah, like probably in a month is like coming up like on our 2-year anniversary collecting on VeVe. Yeah, it's been definitely a wild ride. And now is a very cool time to be involved because, we're kind of in the middle of this bear market. You're seeing prices at much lower than where they were when things were pumping last year. So there's really good opportunities to get involved and, get your hands on some of these like first appearance collectibles. So, there's a lot of analog with the physical collecting market, especially the comic book market, where you have, first appearance tags on a lot of these collectibles, where it's, the first time that Captain America has ever appeared as a, a collectible on chain, or, and then on the comic book side of things, it's, Sean talked about it. We don't really view these comic books that are on the app we view them as like digital counterparts to the physical, and not something that is going to replace them. And it's something that can augment it. And especially for, some of these really significant grail comics, throwing that word around, it's nearly impossible for the everyday person to be able to buy one of those in the physical world. So to be able to basically own a copy of this, something that's licensed with Marvel, and is official, and to own a copy of that book, like Fantastic Four #1, that normally would be out of your price range, or Marvel Comics #1, that's like, there's 50 of them ever that, that still exists, and you're never going to get your hands on one. An opportunity to be able to own one in the digital format is like kind of like a second best. I think people are still going to be really excited about that long term.
Second best, but who knows? I mean, the competition, the demand, and most importantly, the accessibility. Yeah, that's the key word, because for comic books and even video games, when you ship them around the world, it's complicated. As you've seen recently with one of your posts or the Pokemon video game that was destroyed by customs. People are nervous about shipping worldwide.
I heard a story of a original Resident Evil game that I think it was like $150,000 game that got same treatment.
Dude. Yeah. That's awful.
I mean, you think about customs, they're like, if you don't know any better, you're like, this is suspect. What? This is marked for like $100,000 and it's like a cardboard
video game. Yeah.
We'll open this sucker open, like you can get how someone who is none the wiser could think that there's something suspect going on there.
Yeah. And that's the thing about these collectibles. You can buy and sell them instantly.
That's what I love about, like, I sort of mentioned earlier, like, I think the lines between physical and digital are going to get blurred a lot. And so there's a word I've heard thrown around that I sort of hate, but it describes it well, which is phygital. And it's like, you have these physical items that exist that, are either represented by NFTs, or maybe they're not. Maybe they're just purely digitally traded in a vault, and they're traded the sort of way that stocks are traded, because you can click a button, you can buy, sell, trade it, and ownership instantaneously gets transferred to someone else. When you do that, there's not the worry of any shipping. There's no fees associated with shipping. Anytime you can lower the fees, obviously, it's going to be exciting to anyone that's trying to enter the space as an investor, right? If you can get rid of all the shipping problems and fees, and then, there's not like sales tax and online sales tax or whatever it is when you buy an item, like the more you can get rid of those things, the more the sort of market and the industry becomes, interesting to potential investors. And I totally see a world where, like, you have a bunch of graded physical items, and maybe you have like your favorite ones on that aren't overly valuable at home on at your house on display. And then you have a whole other collection in your portfolio, and you're buying, selling, trade. Like there's no reason that in these vaults in the near future, like whether it's PSA's vault or PWCC or any other company that has a vault, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to make someone a trade offer, just like in fantasy football. Like, hey, I'll give you my 96A crash for your 2003 Topps Chrome LeBron PSA 6, right? Like there's no, and that would be so fun. It would be so engaging. And I think would be really, really interesting. And I totally see those lines being blurred. I think people are going to be able to show off their physical collectibles the same way they show off their digital collectibles now, where it's, hey, there's an item in this vault. It's, there's proof of ownership. And so you can have that be your profile picture, and it shows that, you have that item. Or maybe, on Instagram, there's the certain tabs, right? Like you have your photos, and there's like your reels, and then there's your tagged photos, and then there's going to be a collectibles tab, right? And maybe I think it's going to start with probably only digital items being in there, but then at some point soon after that, you'll probably be able to have your physical items in there if they're in a vault, and you can prove ownership, right? And so, I'm very, very excited to see where that all goes. And look, I totally get so let me ask you a couple questions about VeVe. Mm-hmm. Because I'm a noob and I don't totally know everything that's going on. So let me ask, like, is VeVe its own company? Is it owned by Marvel? Is it just have a licensing deal with Marvel?
So VeVe was founded by two guys, Dan Crothers and David Yu, and they're both co-founders of the company. They both actually have an amazing history. Their head of licensing is this guy named Alfred Kahn. He brought Pokemon into the United States. He's considered like the founding father of Pokemon. He had the Nintendo licensing rights.
That man changed the world right there then, huh?
Mm-hmm. So we interviewed him recently. I highly recommend checking out that interview. He discovered Cabbage Patch Kids. This guy is just absolutely incredible. He's a wonderful, wonderful guy. He's basically created my childhood. Like everything that I love in life is because of him. It's amazing. So he's been involved from the very beginning. He actually, David Yu, in the late 90s, actually at 19 years old, sent a letter, asked if he could have the licensing rights for Pokemon trading cards so he could sell them in New Zealand. He agreed to it. He didn't realize this guy's 19 years old, and he still has those licensing rights to this day. It's amazing.
Oh man, that's That's very, very cool. So it is its own separate company, right?
Yeah. So the parent company is Ecomi, and basically VeVe is a subsidiary of Ecomi. They have exclusive partnerships with Disney.
That makes sense. A few other questions for you. What's the most expensive VeVe collectible that's ever sold?
I would say probably Spider-Man's secret rare statue. There's only 1,000 of them, and those have hit upwards to $100,000.
$100,000 on an item that has a print run of 1,000 is very high.
Yeah.
Very, very high. Think about the market cap on that. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. The first comic that was released was Marvel Comics 1, which is appropriate because that's the first Marvel Comics comic that we released in 1939. And there were over 1 million copies produced back in 1939. There's less than 70 copies in the CGC census today. So that was, so they made, I think, 60,000 total editions. There's 600 secret rares, which is the most valuable variant. So for the comic books, there's 5 different variants spread across one total edition run. And you have common, uncommon, rare, ultra rare, and secret rare. And secret rare is the most scarce. And that comic has hit upwards of, I think, $60,000 or $70,000, just the secret rare alone.
So this is something that I like. I really like consistency. I think collectors in general have gravitated towards consistency in different collectible categories. And one example of that is like, you know, I've talked about it a couple of times before, but the gold prism, right? So in 2012, when the first ever Panini Prism trading card set ever released, they had 3 parallels. They had silver, gold, and they had green. Silver and green were unnumbered. In other different releases, you know, sometimes green is numbered, like in soccer, green was numbered to 5, and silver's pretty much always existed, but it's really relatively common. And then you have the gold numbered to 10. And so then in subsequent releases, it's like, you know, the first year of Prism, they had 3 parallels, and then it was like 5 and 8 and 12. And now it's like, there's like 45 parallels in Prism now. And so parallels are just these sort of different color variations that have different levels of scarcity. And so something that's really interesting that doesn't make sense to the initial collector as they come into the sports card categories, they'll say like, okay, look, I'm looking at Prism. I'm maybe looking at a Messi Prism card from 2022 Prism World Cup. Here's this one numbered to 10. It sold for $50,000. Okay, the one numbered to 5 just did 8,000. Like, that doesn't make sense, right? But what it is that gold prism has been there year after year after year. It is the known sort of trusted parallel within the sort of prism universe, so to speak. And it's like, you know, blue is like, you know, one year it's 199, one year it's 149, one year it's 225. And like, you never know what it's going to be. And like, same with purple and same with red. And then it's like, you have a green, it's numbered to 5, but that's, you know, then the next year's a green shimmer numbered to 8. And there's a black gold numbered to 5. And it's like, you know, the gold, even though there are cards that are rarer than it, like, you know, sure, there's like a black 1 of 1 that will sort of exclude from this. But other than that, there are more rare versions that are less valuable because the gold has the history and has been consistent for so long. And I think it's important for collectible companies to very early on, and they can add more different variations or whatever it is as demand sort of necessitates it. But I think it's very important to have some of these variations, some of these parallels, as we would call them in cards, that you really, really stick to. And it sounds like there is a very intuitive model built into the way that VeVe is doing this: common, uncommon, rare, ultra rare, secret rare, that makes it, you know, something that collectors can know and trust and have an understanding of what is what. And there's like this consistency built into it. It's not like, oh, hey, we've got, you know, this comic has 37 variations. This one has 46. That one has 22. That one has 18. It's like, there's some sort of trusted model there. And I do think that is a very good thing. I'm still stuck on the fact that you said there were 1,000 of those, and they were up to $100,000 a piece at one point. Like, you're talking about $100 million market cap on a single digital collectible on VeVe. And like, in the history of trading cards, there are only several cards that have ever eclipsed $100 million market cap in and of themselves. It's probably like the Jordan, the 52 Mantle, the Wagner. I'm trying to even think. Like, there's probably not enough. There's not enough Babe Ruth Sporting News to clear that. Like, maybe the 03 Topps Chrome LeBron, if you look at all the parallels stacked in one. But it's like that is very telling that it was able to achieve a market cap that high. Like, that's a huge industry. And if you can, like, I don't know of a single other item that has that print run, that supply, that reached that level of price. So there's certainly, like, even just hearing that tells me, like, okay, well, heck, there's like something here, right? Like, there's something, at minimum, there's something to pay attention to, which is really interesting.
That specific one as well it's very significant because it's the first ever Marvel collectible, like first ever Marvel NFT that was ever released. So, and basically, so that initial run, there was 5 collectibles in that set, basically Spider-Man in 5, different, positions, and a couple of them were animated. And so, yeah, so the secret rare was basically the most rare within that set. And so with that set is the first ever Marvel NFT that was ever released. And then it's also the first ever Spider-Man, and Spider-Man is just like the most significant, IP when it comes to, superheroes right now. So
yeah. And to add to that point, there are also first appearance tags on some of these collectibles, because they're the first time we ever see Spider-Man on the blockchain. So they have first appearance on there. And it's the same way for a lot of collectibles. Now, if it's not a character, they have first edition. So if it's like a car or a piece of art, they'll have a first edition on there as well. And it's all written in the metadata, which is a really big deal. But also going back to like the comic books too, like Marvel Comics 1, I mean, that's a grail comic. I mean, it's sold for $2 or $3 million recently. And it's in a higher grade, not its highest grade, in a higher grade. And there's less than 70 copies. So if those all disappeared, these NFTs have encapsulated this comic book on the blockchain. So you still have an opportunity to have ownership of these in the future, which I think is really going to be really important.
Yeah, I love that they are very openly denoting what the firsts are. And this is something that really frustrates me with cards, is like right now in basketball cards, they're like still releasing, like LaMelo Ball rookies and stuff. Maybe not LaMelo. Who would they like they're releasing Cade Cunningham rookies still in his, more than halfway through his second season, and they're like backdating the product. And there's some really interesting examples too. Like this is sort of, you can see how much of a nerd I am by like the example I'm about to give. But I'm very big into soccer cards, and one of the very first Erling Haaland cards ever made was in this set called it was Topps BVB, curated. So it was Dortmund was making this set in collaboration with Topps, and they were just like, basically the whole team was in it, and Haaland had a card in that. Erling Haaland, I don't know how much you guys are into soccer, but he's like one of the young players that's like just absolutely tearing it up, and he's in like the top 5 prices all time in soccer for any player in history. And so they released this set. It's one of Haaland's first ever cards. But because it was like some release with the team, and the team is like, oh, hey, it's like the 2020 season, they like say, okay, this is the 2020 Erling Haaland card. And then like months later, Topps is releasing cards on their own that they're calling 2019, and they have the rookie logo on the card. And it's like, I think there were releases that came out almost a full year after the Haaland Dortmund curated set card that are backdated to 2019 that have the rookie logo that are worth significantly more. And there's no real structure in cards for like what's a rookie and what's not. And even in baseball, people like sort of joke around like, oh, hey, like is Wander Franco a rookie again this year? Like, oh, who's going to be like, is this guy going to maintain rookie status? Like, oh, then Topps is like, oh, let's call him a call up this year so we can call him a rookie next year. And it's like, we have his prospect card before that. And it's like, I wish there was a little more rigidity to determining the rules around what actually is a rookie card. And one of the things that I wish there was, which there's just no sort of documentation of, is like, what's the first card that was ever made of a player? There's no documentation of that whatsoever, which is frustrating. Because like if someone could somehow go back and automatically backdate that and like have a full resource where people could see this is the first card this player made, that's the first card this player made, like that would totally increase the market around those individual cards. But we don't have that whatsoever. And so I really do like when, it's not so much like the rookie card it's like a cheap way to make so many things a first, right? But when they're actually, I love when companies really denote like, this is the first one, like this is it, that, and there's not more, like, and we're not gonna make ones a year later that have a rookie logo, like, so that's just hearing a little more about VeVe, that is another thing that to me is like, man, I wish cards got that right.
And there's so many different level of entries too. I mean, you have a wide range of pricing, can be any collector. And on top of that, they're coming out with this thing called the MCP program. It's a utility added for these collectibles. If you own these collectibles, you get points for them. So with these points, you're going to be able to get certain perks. So you have an incentive for holding on to these, for being an actual collector. Because they're coming out with their own metaverse, which will inevitably also have Disney and Marvel exclusively, because that's their partner. And also being able to carry these around, man. I have over 1,000 collectibles that I can carry in my pocket on the go, that I can use in augmented reality. I can read these comic books or play with these collectibles. You're going to be able to like meet Todd McFarlane. This is the FA of Batman. It's the first DC collectible. And it's also dropped on VeVe. And I had a chance to meet Todd in person. He signed it. It was just a screenshot on my phone, But in the future, you're going to be able to meet these artists and they're going to be able to sign it on your phone and imprint that signature onto your collectible. So it's a
Certified on the
authentic signature
blockchain,
certified
you
on
know.
the blockchain.
Mhm.
And that's awesome too, which I'm really excited
Yeah.
about.
Yeah. There's a whole lot of really cool tech and things to be built out around this. And I'll say too, like, look, obviously you guys know that I love all these different collectible categories and learning about new categories. And I always try to have my ear to the ground on new things that happen. So like, Sean, I know you have my number. Spencer, we should start a group text after this.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, we'll
anytime,
link up.
Hell yeah.
anytime any like big breaking news, anything cool happens, comes out, like, dude, just shoot me a text. Like I love covering this stuff. And you know, a lot of it's just like trying to even like there's, you know, obviously there's a million different things to look at and see and try to cover and figure out what all is going on. But like I can't stay on top of all of it. But so it's like, you know, when you guys see like, oh, hey, there's a huge sale, like, oh man, like they just signed a partnership with some, you know, other really big company. This is big news. Or, you know, hey, like AF15 just did this, whatever. Like I'd love to know that. I'd love to be you know, if you guys see cool things, I'd love to have those passed along.
They just announced the Lamborghini drop for Sunday. So basically they're like digital models of Lamborghini cars that they, you know, are officially licensed with Lambo.
That you can drive in augmented reality and also in the metaverse as well. This is a deeper conversation, but you've got to look at Batcals, which is on a platform called Palm NFT. And Palm NFT is a company owned by the Heyman brothers. It is one of the biggest producers of all time. He produced all the Harry Potter films, so he's very much connected to the Warner Brothers IP. And they dropped these things, a generative avatar project of 11,000 Batcals. They're basically Batman's mask, and they're all these different styles. And they're based on traits. The value is based on traits. But if you own these, they've been airdropping you collectibles. You've been able to get actual movie premiere tickets to go see Black Adam. I know people in New York were able to go because they own a Batcal. Spencer's been to actual in real life events because of Batcal. Jim Lee is one of the I think he was one of the head designers on the NFT. So basically it's a Jim Lee NFT project.
He's like super heavily involved in the project. Yeah.
And now they've been releasing DC comics on there as well. So like they just dropped the Superman 1 comic, which is recently sold for $5.2 million as an 8.0 grade. And there's only 3,000 total editions of that comic. And Spencer has able.
Yeah, I got really lucky. I got one of those in a drop. Those are going for like $10,000. You know, that's like the floor price on those.
He spent $10 on it. It's worth $10 grand.
It's not I say that's not bad.
Yeah. But that's the cool thing about it, because they've actually shown big, credible licensed IP that has utility, like real utility. And right now, the floor is only around $500 for them, which I think is incredibly fair considering the long-term vision they have for their project.
Yeah, sort of a general comment. I understand the purpose of utility. It's like a funny thing to say. Like I understand why there's a lot of these companies feel the draw to try to have there be IRL experiences, utility, all these different things. But I do think utility and collectability a little bit fly in the face of each other. Because let's say there's an NFT that has a very massive utility, right? And it's like, well, and that NFT is worth $1,000. Well, how much of that value is derived from its collectability? What happens when that utility goes away? Or what happens, like, you know, even an example that's really interesting is like within so rare cards, right? And you look at so rare cards, and one of the things that's like very intriguing to me in so rare is I don't think many people have tackled it from the collectible perspective. It's more from the utility perspective. There are a couple of sets that exist within the so rare ecosystem that don't have any utility. And then those are like almost the ones that I'm drawn to the most, because I'm like, okay, look, I understand the game. The game is very fun. I play it. I set my lineups, but I also know that like, if I don't set good lineups, if I don't ever use those cards that I have to win other prizes, other cards, other Ethereum, whatever, I know that like when those players retire, those cards are going to be virtually worthless. And so, you know, there's but it's because like, and you can see the sort of conundrum that appears here. It's like, okay, well, that item is not going to be valuable long-term because its value is not derived from collectability. Its value is derived from utility. And so there certainly is value in utility, but it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, you see, right? Because like if something is worth $10,000 and a huge part of that is the utility, well, what happens if the utility goes away? Or is that item really a collectible? Or are you buying access? Or are you buying a pass to something? So it's like, I don't know, I tend to often be drawn towards the things that have no utility, because it's like, I love the collectible side of it more than anything. Right. And so like, I often am drawn to the things that have less utility. Or it's like, even within so rare, like I said, they did one set around the World Cup where I'm like, I need to go buy that whole set like soon, because like there's no utility. So the whole value is around collectability. It's like one of the only sets that exists within their ecosystem that doesn't have utility. It's the first World Cup that they were ever part of. It's like, okay, you know, you can start to build a pretty interesting thesis there, right? And you know, I even wonder like, okay, what happens when players retire and their one of one unique card goes for sale? Like, what will the value of that be? Let's say like let's say Ronaldo had a career-ending injury tomorrow and his one-of-one so rare card went for sale and could never be played in the game again. I'm very curious what the value of that would be based on just the collectability of it alone.
That's an incredibly valid point. Incredibly valid. That's why I'm actually a little bit worrisome for a lot of projects, because we think the majority of NFTs are going to fail. You know, they're not going to be worth much. I mean, we've actually talked about this before, that we think like 98%. Gary Vee said the same thing, but we believe the same. But that's why we only focus on the big IP, the credible IP that we know that have the resources to make sure they succeed, because they're incentivized to do so. They get commission off every single sale for life. So it's in their best interest to make sure that these things are worth as much as possible.
Aligned incentives are very important. It's one of the things that I think has been frustrating about the sports card industry in the last year or two, is you see like Panini very quickly realizes, okay, crap, Fanatics came in, they bought all our licenses. We're not going to have NFL in a couple of years. We're not going to have NBA in a couple of years. Like the gig's up in 2026. So let's run the printers, baby. Right?
Exactly.
Like it's exactly how
That's
it is.
really,
right? And they're like customer service. We haven't heard of that, right? Like we don't need to do the redemptions here or whatever it is. So like, you know, it's like it's a catch-22, because like I understand why they're doing what they're doing, but it's like they're in this position where, you know, it doesn't behoove them to think about the long-term value of some of the collectibles that they're making, right? So they're like, hey, look, you know, NFL, we don't have this license forever, so we're gonna print really heavy on it, and it makes sense. It's like, you know, it's not really anyone's fault, but I do love when there's a situation where incentives are aligned, and I do think that can be a very, very powerful thing.
Totally agree. What would be some advice that you would give to new collectors in the collectible space?
Your first buys will probably be your worst buys. Play with money that you're willing to lose. I would say like, there are multiple reasons to collect. They are not mutually exclusive. You collect because, man, I just love this thing. You also collect because, hey, I have an idea. I think this thing's going to be worth a lot more in the future. Those things can overlap. People ask me, do you buy items to collect or do you buy items to invest? The answer to that is yes. A lot of these things, like, you know, even games where I'm like, you know, Super Monkey Ball, like it would take an exorbitant offer for me to sell this way above market, because like I have an emotional attachment to this. But like, newsflash, we can't take this stuff with us when we die. I'm going to sell it all before I go, hopefully, right? And so like when I do eventually sell it one day, you don't need to bury me with my GameCube games. It's a great system, but it wasn't accurate. Okay. Like, you know, I do hope that when I sell these things one day, I'm able to sell them for more than I paid for them. But I would say, as it relates to the sort of advice around that, is like, you know, if you purely just like, hey, I just really like that game, I just want one for display, I don't care if I lose money on it, then like no one can give you advice. Buy what you like, and just buy what you enjoy, and then don't be too worried about it from there, right? And you know, there's probably some tools, like I would say, you know, make your eBay save searches to try to find the things you really want, some advice like that. But like, outside of sort of how to buy the things that you want or how to grade stuff, or there's not a whole lot of advice to give the person who's purely collecting from the perspective, like, I just want one of those for my shelf and I don't care what it's worth in 5 years. I'm not worried about it. Now, for the person who maybe is that, but also is like, okay, yeah, I do really want this to be a good investment, I would definitely say like, you're going to want to do a lot of research before you do much buying. I would say too, it is very good to have a group of people around you who you trust. I always like, even with the thousands and probably tens of thousands of hours I have in trading cards, there's a group of people who I trust, who I text them like, what do you think this is worth? Right? Like it's sort of like, don't cheat. How much do you think this is selling for? Right. And it's like, it's always a very good barometer to have a community around you. It's like a couple of things. One, like it makes it way more fun. Like I have friends that I've made through collecting cards. I have friends that weren't card collectors that I brought in, who now I talk to every single day, because like we're just talking and shooting the breeze and having a good time and talking collectibles. Right. So like, the couple things I would say is just very, very general advice to even people who are investing is do a ton of research, play with money that you're willing to lose, and build a community of people around you that, one, will make it a lot more fun, and two, will also keep you in check when you're trying to buy really stupid things.
That's such a great piece of advice, man. That's awesome.
Sean keeps me in check.
My buddies keep me in check. They're like, I'll like post something and they're like, dude, you are way too far down the rabbit hole. Like nobody cares about like, you know, like the Finding Nemo 2 opening week, like AMC theaters ticket in PSA 1 condition. Like get over yourself.
I do. It's funny because Spencer and we actually met backpacking in Europe about 5 years ago. And about 2 years ago, he got me involved in crypto, and I bought some cryptocurrency, and then it did pretty well. And I was like, Spencer, so what's up with this crypto stuff? And he started teaching me about crypto and NFTs, and then I started teaching about collecting and investing in comic books. And that's how we just started teaching each other, and then we became really close. And that's how we started our podcast with Kevin, who's been a friend for 10 years. Big shout to Kev. But so between the three of us, we started our podcast to help educate people about the significance of these collectibles and IP, and how to invest. And it's been fun. Never financial advice, collecting advice.
Financial advice.
But
so this is something I've been like really toiling around recently. Like, I think everyone who's in a collectible category is very much like, let's grow this category, right? Why is that? There are certainly two groups of people here, right? There's people that's like, man, I just love this. This is fun. I can talk about this all day. And, I hope more people can enjoy this. And there's the group of people who are like, I think that I want my cards to go up in value. I would think I want my, my moonbirds to go up in value, whatever it is, right? And it can be really weird when you can sort of tell who's who from time to time, but you see people who are just like overly enthusiastic about the thing that they're doing and only report the positive news and really are like, adamant to try and just bring more money in to ultimately make more money for themselves. And it's just like it's sort of, I don't know, a weird thing that I'm trying to like work through right now. It's like, it's in my head. I'm like, yeah, I'd love for the hobby to grow. I'd love for the collectibles industry to grow, but how much of that is like self-serving versus actually trying to do something that is super beneficial and positive to like the wider community and to, like people in general. Right. And so I don't know, it's an interesting thing that I think about. And I definitely like, there's enough in cards where I know that it could be 100 times bigger than it is, but there's enough problems too, where I'm like, oh man, I know this could fall a lot more before we get to that point. And so it's like, a place too, where I'm just like, man, it's an interesting thing to really navigate. I'm sure you guys deal with it as creators too. Is like, okay, what really is that end mission we're driving towards? And I'm certainly at a spot right now, like, I think you guys can tell I really love this stuff, but I'm also trying to be like, well, hey, what really is the end that I want to drive to? What really is that thing I want to drive to? It's like, I'm not here to pump my own bags, right? That's not what I want to do or who I want to be. Do I want my items to go up in value? Yeah, everyone does, but that's not my driving force behind what I'm doing. And so I don't know, it's just, I've seen more and more recently, and there are particularly some specific communities. I think like you'll probably see it a lot in certain NFT projects. You'll see it a lot in certain cryptos, where you'll see people just really like ruthlessly being like, oh, this is the best. Like you need to buy this and buy the one that's number 5700. That was mine. Right. Like, there's that interesting sort of thing going on. I wanted to see your guys' opinion.
Yeah. Well, I think the big difference there, it's like shilling versus educating, and I think that, a lot of these people that are just shilling, doing anything good for the space, like they're just trying to show and pump their own bags. Whereas, if you're actually providing, something positive and creating content that people can learn from so they can get involved and they can do the things that you're doing and get excited about it as much as you are. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Transparency is really important. It's really important. And for me, when I buy collectibles, I buy the things that I love. So if they dip or go down, it doesn't hurt as much because I love them. I just love the things that I buy into. But at the same time, I love ROI. I think people who are honest and create genuine content, truth will come out over time.
Yeah. And I would even like add to, people who are really bag pumping, from the people with the world's biggest following to the people with 12 Twitter followers. Like, it's a very short-sighted game to play. It's a very, very short-sighted game to play. It's like, do you want people to naturally come in because they like it and there's actually really great things going on within the industry, or are you just trying to make a quick buck? And if you bring someone in, if you deceptively bring them into the thing that you're doing, they're not going to stick around real long.
Yeah, definitely.
Totally agree.
Here, I have a fun one too. Something we can do really quick right now. So I just saw a credit card charge come through from PSA. So we do a little grade reveal here on the card.
Oh, cool.
Nice. Here we
So
go.
I'll tell you what it is first and what I'm expecting it to be. So this is a Christian Pulisic rookie patch autograph card from 2016 Select. It's the tie-dye version, limited to 15. It was already in a PSA 9 holder. It did not have an autograph grade. I thought the autograph looked really crisp. I thought the autograph was 10. At the same time, I had this card in my hand. I looked it over, and it's hard to tell through the clear plastic cases sometimes what's on the card, what's not on the card, but I looked at it, I'm like, I've seen a lot of these cards. This is a thick stock card. The corners look really nice. The edges look really nice. It's well centered. I'm like, I think this one actually like could be a 10 if they really looked it over. So what I did is I sent it in for review, which is when you have a card that's already graded by PSA and you want them to sort of look at it again. But I also sent it in as the review with a dual grade. So they will at least crack it out and add an autograph grade to it.
Nice.
So my guess is it's probably a 9 with a 10 autograph. I would be happy with that. Anything less than that, I'd be like, I just, burnt $100.
Yeah.
Anything more than that would probably be like, if it's somehow dual 10, I'd probably, that's a several $1,000 win. So we will, here, let me see if I can find this here. Okay. 9 with 10 auto. So that's what I was expecting.
Nice.
So we'll take that. That increases the value of the card more than $100, and it cost me $100 to grade it. So it's probably, $100 to $200 win off that. So we'll take that.
Nice.
Is that grading process pretty quick? It's pretty swift.
Definitely dependent on what you're subbing in. So like, if you sub, I've found that if you are submitting things that like already sort of exist in their catalog that other people have submitted and it's trading cards, like those generally come back pretty fast. If you're like, I've got 50 movie tickets and I'm going to manually input every one of these, and someone on the back end is going to have to like verify all this stuff. Like that's a little bit of a slower process.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So, it's dependent, but like, man, you look at where they were at like 2 years ago when their cheapest service level was $300 a card. And
wow,
they were like, there was stuff that was taking 18, 24 months to turn. They've worked through that backlog like a champ, man. Like
that's
now
awesome.
you can submit stuff at $19 a card. Even some categories are $15 a card, and they're like getting it back to you within a couple months, which is really, really
That's
great.
impressive.
It's really solid.
This comic right here, this is the first appearance of Black Widow, and I submitted it right before the pandemic, and I didn't see it for 2 years.
Is it because it's signature series and went slow?
So it was signed by Stan Lee, and I sent it to get signed by Larry Lieber, who's Stan Lee's brother, and he's like 90 years old. So he's like, I don't want to meet anybody. I can't. I'm not going to sign anything right now. I'm 90 years old. Like I'm not gonna get sick. And they cracked the case. So they said, here's your two options, Sean. We can reseal it. You can pay to reseal it and we'll send it back to CGC and get it graded and then we'll send it back to you, or you can just wait it out. I'm like, God damn it. Are you serious? What the hell, man? So I waited 2 years and I'm happy I waited because they ended up signing it. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I will say I've just done my first couple comic book subs recently, and I'm like,
I saw that, man. Congrats. I have a copy too. That's dope.
Very impressed with
very jealous of that one.
How quickly they turn stuff. Now I will say their magazines are very, very, very slow. I submitted some magazines, I think over 2 years ago now.
Wow.
And
Really?
they actually charged me for my new membership before they ever graded the first round of things I sent them.
Oh my God.
And so I was like,
you've been waiting 2 years too for magazines?
I don't have them back yet. And they're
Wow.
they were like, it was like fun stuff. It's like XXL freshman covers with like, and I'm like, music. We were talking about music earlier. There's no real place to like buy things that you can really grade. And so I was like, oh, these XXL freshman covers, sort of like rap rookie cards, right? Like, I go back and get like the Asher Roth and the Charles Hamilton and the Travis Scott and the Future. I'm like, oh, these are sweet. And they were like $5 or $10. I'm like, okay, great. $30 to grade them. I'll be in them for $40, $50. Like, these are awesome. But they're still sitting somewhere at CGC.
Have you heard from them recently?
No, I haven't heard from them at all. So I don't know. Well,
man.
But yeah, I mean, but then like, I submit them 20 comics and like door to door, they're back in 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, wow, that's fast.
Well, Eric, it was so awesome having you on the podcast, man.
Yeah.
It's been a really fun day talking about the space, and I'm excited to have you on again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. This is really fun, and I'll say you guys had big smiles on your face the whole time. I have real positive energy about this, and I love that, man. Positivity is infectious, and so it's really fun.
We just love collectibles, man. We just like doing this.
It's really fun to see fellow people who are just like fellow collectors who are very enthusiastic about what they do, and that can just reignite the spark, man. So that's really cool stuff, guys. Keep it up, and I really do appreciate you guys having me on and even educating me on some of the stuff that I'm a little bit of a noob on.
And likewise,
Absolutely.
the sports card market, man. I'm excited to learn more about that. And everyone out there, make sure to follow him on both Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter at Eric Whiteback. We'll make sure to include his details and links down below. And we'll see you all in the next one.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Awesome. Thanks.